Restore the stream, please. Well, it looks like we should be back. Now, I would say we need to proceed in some way. I'm going to do a backup. We are back. Yes, I'm going to activate some backup recording software on my computer so that no matter what happens with this.
It's looking like it's working. People are saying that they see it again.
Okay, great. So candidate Holsopple, my apologies to you. I'm going to give you an extra 2 minutes to speak because of this unfortunate technical difficulty to answer that last question about how to enable these obstacles to the 222 goals to be overcome in some parts of the world.
Yeah, well, we're back to it being a big idea, to where is that something that we have the public will, the corporate will, and the government will to make that impact? Do we see it as useful to all of the efforts in order to achieve those? Because it is the definition of a peaceful, prosperous society when all people have dignified access to food, water, shelter. You can't have a civil society if you have people dying in the street from or the field or wherever it happens to be without food, water, shelter. And I would include healthcare in that. You know, you don't want somebody dying outside the hospital. You know, where do you draw that line? So the provisions of that, the methods of doing that, I would leave up to experts. And back to 222, we're writing our request for proposals for those regional, collaborative, multidiscipline approach that clearly state the concept of the problem they've got and what methodologies that they would employ, what resources they would need to employ those. So I see it as each community being this. I don't see 222 as a handout. I see it as a hand up that people could actually construct their own lives, learn the skills necessary, learn the civil behavior that's necessary, so that we bring down the cost of our law enforcement, as I say, crime and everything else. So it would be largely regionable, but as the Sustainable Development Goals in the United Nations use common best practices. So we would learn from our mistakes, and we would maintain a common mission and a constant vision of what we're going after. And I believe with that, we can achieve it. I'm counting on it. And whether or not I win the Transhumanist nomination, I'll go on doing this. If I win the Transhumanist nomination, the major attention getter that I will have is 222. And I'm very clear on my website, project222.org, that this is a coalition. This is using all of our knowledge and all of our assets to address the existential threat that faces us all. And again, I'm going back to climate crisis. We don't have a lot of time to make these decisions. We already see the mass displacement of populations, and that's continuing. And we need to build back with new technologies and more redundant systems for supplying our food, water, and shelter when these things do occur. So I'm good. I can't hear you.
Yes, thank you, candidate Holsopple. You were right on time for this response. And now we will move on to the next phase of our debate. I apologize for the momentary stream outage. It seems to have been resolved now. And this is just in time for our rebuttals and miscellaneous remarks. Before we go to the viewer questions, we will give each candidate 3 minutes to speak about whatever they want, essentially. So this is your opportunity to address anything thus far in the debate and give your perspective on it. Candidate Haywire, you have 3 minutes.
Great. So a lot of people are saying that I don't have a filter in the comments. And I just want to say that while that isn't true, unfiltered self-expression is very important. If all we have is people that are really restrained, then we might as well just have robots. Now, robots are fantastic, but we need a human spirit to bring us forward into a future of artists. That's what Zoltan Islam is so passionate about when he talks about this artist class that's going to evolve. That's what I talk about in my book, The New Art Right, the artists that are leading us forward into a future. Now, the artists aren't thinking about filters or self-restraint. The artists are thinking about passionate self-expression. And I am connected to an incredible community of artists, musicians, filmmakers, photographers, philosophers, self-expressive people that aren't worried about restraining themselves. What they're concerned about is expressing themselves. They are out of the box. So was Steve Jobs. So was Bill Gates. You know who else wasn't worried about restraint? Elon Musk. When he talked about going to Mars, when he was a teenager, he wasn't thinking about filtering himself. He was thinking about going to Mars. So yes, we need to restrain ourselves a bit, but if we restrain ourselves too much, we're not going to go to Mars. If we restrain ourselves too much, we're not going to transcend the species. We're going to be stuck as humans forever. If we restrain ourselves too much, we're not going to cure aging. And if we restrain ourselves too much, we're not going to be able to fund LSD or MDMA as therapeutic remedies. If we restrain ourselves too much, the Transhumanist Party will never get out of its echo chamber. As Charles was talking about earlier in the debate, and thank you, Charles, for addressing the echo chamber issue. If we restrain ourselves too much and don't give way to transgressive self-expression, we will be stuck as a fringe party with no outreach. Now, yes, I can be a bit much for people, but we are all, as transhumanists, a bit much for the mainstream. And I think it's time to stop restraining ourselves, to expand our outreach, for all of us to unite as one party, one third party, the Transhumanist Party, to go outside of the box like Elon Musk did, like David Bowie did, like the industrial band Front 242 did, to go beyond the center.
Thank you, Candidate Haywire. You spoke for 3 minutes. Now, Candidate Ben Zion, you have 3 minutes for rebuttals and miscellaneous remarks.
Yes. Well, I'll say at the risk of, people are saying that I'm responding too much to Haywire, but there's nothing controversial about the Transhumanist Party. There's nothing that's too far outside of the mainstream in the Transhumanist Party. We are at core, like the Humanity Plus organization, like all of these organizations, we are life extensionists. We are techno-optimists. It's nothing scary about that. There's things that we can do to make that scary. I think you're probably doing some of those things. But it's terribly uncontroversial. The de facto life extension extensionist that Mr. Holsopple remarked about, I do believe that's 90+% of the population, and we need to be appealing to all of those people. The best way to do that is to say things that make sense. The Futurist New Deal is a platform that makes sense. It's a result of collaborations of serious-minded policy analysts and individuals in the Arizona Transhumanist Party. And we've been working tirelessly, as I said, averaging 20 interviews a week. All of these are thought leaders in technology or political figures, interviewing career politicians. As I mentioned, interviewed a minister, an emissary from the Estonian government, talking about building out this operation, making the Transhumanist Party a mainstream party by advancing these goals that we have in common with this kind of organization, particularly e-governance and I-voting. But there's a ripple effect from those things, embracing advanced technology in the near term. We all know this, and this is what we need to be focusing on. I mean, public health. It's not sexy. It doesn't drive clicks. But there's ways that we're doing it that does. Human development. Talking about economics. It's still something that people are enjoying these conversations, and people inside and outside of this organization are doing. You will be rewarded for supporting this organization in whatever way you see fit. I do believe that we're on track with some of these outcomes that we want. Sometimes in these aforementioned chat rooms, I'm hearing people say that they don't care about techno-progressive policy or techno-futurist policy. That we should just put the bar kind of low. We should just have fun thought experiments, right-wing thought experiments, or far futurist thought experiments, like Haywire does. Oh, what if we could bring Hitler back from the dead? What a fun thing! Now, that's not advancing any conversation. That's just more silliness. And so please go the extra mile and support an organization like the Transhumanist Party, support an organization like the Arizona Transhumanist Party. Take some time, look at the documents that we've published about the futurist New Deal, look at some of these talks that we're doing with important individuals in this community. Don't be attacking one another. Don't be attacking Max Moore. Max Moore was doing this when you were still in diapers. Everybody keep up the pace. You guys are running great campaigns. I am impressed with everything that you're doing. We have these little transactional things, but you guys are doing a good job. Don't take it too hard, Rachel. And everybody have a nice time. And check out the Futurist New Deal, please. It is the way of moving this party into the mainstream.
Thank you, candidate Ben Zion. You spoke for 3 minutes and 50 seconds, so that subtracts 50 seconds from your subsequent time, but you have accumulated a lot of time prior to this. Now, candidate Holsopple, you have 3 minutes for rebuttals and miscellaneous remarks.
Yeah, one that sticks to my mind is Rachel, I love your enthusiasm, but I have no idea what you're talking about arriving on a rocket ship. But we do have,
the mothership, I think.
Well, we do have a rocket scientist in the Transhumanist Party. I think we have many. And so that space exploration, the aspiration of humankind to reach beyond, is something that the Transhumanist Party has to embrace. And I too am an artist rather than a scientist, and I take a different approach, and I think that's what's required to reach the mainstream, is a more thought out. I'm not saying that we can't be controversial, but we have to be understandable, and that's what I will try to do. Not throwing stones at anyone else, but yeah, I'm not going to pick on anybody. I do want the conversation to advance. I think that once we actually have a nominee, if the nominee will work with the Transhumanist Party in good communication, we can clarify this message, and we can bring all of the core values into a more understandable, a more attractively presented format that we can make a difference. And as I say, we can set up possibly that for down ballots and for future presidential runs, to where we can actually break into that two-party system. I think over the next coming years, there's going to be less and less confidence in that as the independent party has grown to be the largest party. That shows that there is room. People are looking, people are dissatisfied with those existing parties. And I would do what I can to in an understandable way, to present those basic platforms that the Transhumanist Party would support and incorporate the ideas for at least presentation that Ben has and that Rachel have. If it was something that I saw was congruent with my platform, I would try to incorporate that in, or at least allow room for that to be developed by that candidate in something of a shadow government of sorts. So yeah, that's I look forward to moving forward. And I don't, as I say, my phone's plugged in and it keeps draining. I'll reserve hopefully time for questions if we can get to the audience questions. I'm very anxious to do that.
Yes, thank you, Candidate Holsopple, and we will now get to the audience questions. The first audience question is one for every candidate because I think it's an important question to discuss essentially what the Transhumanist Party ought to focus on. So David Shoemaker asked essentially, what is the single most important issue or the single most important concern that you believe the Transhumanist Party should address? Candidate Haywire, I will give you 3 minutes for this question.
Making cryonics affordable to everybody, making transhumanism for everyone. There are too many gatekeepers right now, some who are being funded by very, very questionable sources that have been in the news recently. It is so important for each and every human being, whether they are rational, neurodiverse, schizophrenic, or anywhere in between, to have access to life extension technology. We need to be subsidizing cryonics so life extension is affordable. Nobody should have to go through death. We need to begin curing aging and making life extension affordable. Transhumanism is for everyone. I like how Charles was talking about doing outreach to homeless people. I have been homeless before, and I talk to people on the streets. And I would love to see those people. They had boom boxes, they were rapping. Some of them, they were philosophizing. They were schizophrenic. And they were talking about how the government was controlling their thoughts. Maybe some of them were full of it. Most of them were full of it, but some of them, they had little nuggets of truth. And you know what? Those people, they deserved to have access to life extension, just like every upper middle class citizen, just like every wealthy billionaire. Those people deserved to have life extension too. Cryonics is for everyone. Life extension is for everyone. Transhumanism is for everyone. And public education on transhumanism is for everybody. Universal basic income, which Andrew Yang began to lead the charge on, is so important. With all of these displaced workers, we need to begin sharing wealth with people in our nation through taking the money that's going to war, surveillance, keeping nonviolent drug offenders and sex workers in prison, whether they have jobs as dominatrixes, whether they're prostitutes or they're simply wearing bikini photos for fetish sites, one pieces, whatever they're doing, whether they're in prison, whether they're selling drugs on street corners and crying about how the government is putting chips in their brains. They need life extension. Life extension and transhumanism for all.
Hey, are we still live here?
Yes, Candidate Ben Zion, can you hear me?
I can, sir.
Yes. So you have 3 minutes to address the question of what is the main issue that the Transhumanist Party should focus on.
Yeah. Well, that was a moving speech, and I think there were some little nuggets of truth in there. Maybe there's some little nuggets of truth coming from the Haywire campaign to some degree. But we need to maybe aim the bar a little higher than that. I'll say of this discussion, I do not think that, I think that cryonics is pretty well subsidized in the sense that it is available in the marketplace. And I think that we have so many interventions coming down the pipeline for life extension that subsidizing that in the way that was described there seems it's an idea for someone who hasn't really seriously considered these perhaps. But I've heard plenty of people say this. It came up in my discussion with Florian Marcus. It came up with my discussion in a pre-interview today. There are awful lot of ways that we can be using big data in emerging biomedicine. We can be using automation and advanced algorithms in emerging biomedicine. And all the various actual medical breakthroughs coming down the pipeline towards ending cell death. Those are the things that we need to focus on. I don't have a cryonics plan because I believe that life extension will be achieved through these other means. And so I would not support that. But I do agree with candidate Haywire that radical life extension is our organizing principle in this community. And thank you for being willing to stand up for that. How much time do I have left?
You have 1 minute and 20 seconds.
Okay. I want to address something that came up before about trade protectionism in general. This is not a laughing matter. And it's you can dismiss a whole multitude of sins by saying that we're not a mainstream party, so we don't have to talk seriously about these things. But millions of U.S. jobs, people who are earning a living before this trade war broke out, have been lost in the course of this trade war. The kind of positions that Ms. Haywire are taking on this subject would grow that trade war exponentially. That would possibly lead to a society that cannot support an affluent society. That's not the way that anybody is seriously going to approach this. So we have to be a little careful with that rhetoric. Maybe there is a place for some kind of economic isolationism. We are on the same page as to other forms of isolationism, but we have to try to present a serious face of this organization and give serious consideration to these heady issues as we're talking. And the Futures New Deal does do that. I'm not convinced that these other campaigns do.
Thank you, candidate Ben Zion. Now we move to candidate Holsopple. What is the single most important issue that the Transhumanist Party should be addressing?
Well, I think the single most important issue that humanity should be addressing is the mass migration of people due to climate change and other factors. Now, if I think it was Bertrand Russell that said, in order to have a peaceful, prosperous society, we must have a stationary society. And with climate change, we're going to have more and more mass dislocation of populations. And we need to come up with, as I say, methodologies and education of those populations on dealing with a new reality over this coming years and decades and hopefully centuries that we're going to populate this planet. So we need to reach people at an emotional level and an intellectual level and appeal to what most people have been programmed to respond to fear. I think a good dose of fear that brings people to a common realization of what's important and what's necessary that we do is a good thing. And it's becoming more and more a topic within the government and within industry that is reinvesting in ways that are more sustainable. So climate change is my number one reasoning for doing most of the advocacy that I do, because the problems are going to get worse, not better. And the current economic structure is not currently going to reward that, but it's becoming more and more vogue, more popular to do things for each other and for the environment. And a lot of it is just talk and advertising and possibly deceptive in order just to sell product. But I think if we have a common product, we can see a vision, we can depict what problems are going to happen, we can foresee the things that are happening. As time goes by, we'll have a history of those accurate predictions. And if we can create a mechanism for dealing with those displaced populations, we can possibly negate more, and we can deal with those that are displaced more efficiently and get them back up to where they can contribute back to the common good. And everybody plant a tree, you know.
Thank you, candidate Holsopple, and we will add 10 seconds to your time. Now, the next question that I would like to ask is from Starseeder, one of our commentators, who is interested in vertical garden towers in cities across the United States. He's referring to vertical farming, which is one emerging technology that the Transhumanist Party supports. What would be your policy positions toward vertical garden towers and vertical farming? I will allocate 2 minutes to this question for each candidate. Candidate Haywire, you may begin.
Well, I think the first step to this would be to create a video game for vertical farming. I remember growing up and playing a game called The Sims, where you could create these miniature kind of housing kind of projects where you could create these characters and you could build walls and you could build doors, you could even build pools and you could swim on them. So I would start by creating these prototypes of farms in which you could use these simulations to create farms through these video games. And then I would take that to build a wider model in which we could create these actual farms and we could test them that way. And then I would begin building the farms, subsidizing them, and using them kind of like as experimental test playgrounds once we began building them through an actual model. And maybe we could have a few trial kind of people to test them out and just kind of see how that goes. I mean, we have a big green revolution that is taking place right now. I think that that's really exciting. I have a friend, his name is Jonathan. He is a nuclear engineer right now, but he's also very focused on green technology. And I think that this kind of green kind of tech revolution is very exciting right now, and I'd love to see more of that happening. So I think definitely like breeding entertainment and green technology is a great way to get the awareness out about these technologies, and I want to see more of that. A lot of people, they will scoff at the entertainment and the culture aspect. They take it lightly because they're all, we only care about policy. But you know, the people that only care about policy, you know what they don't have? Outreach. And you know what the people who care about entertainment and culture have? Outreach. You know what we have? Popularity. You know what we have? The ability to reach the minds of the masses and to grow the Transhumanist Party and to make sustainable farming popular so we can make this happen. Let's start with video games. Let's start building these prototypes through video games, and then let's make them an actual reality for sustainable farming. Let's begin building these green technologies so we can upgrade farming to a higher level and bring forth this green revolution that we've been working on for so long. I'd love to see this develop. I think there is such a great potential in what is occurring right now. And I just really look forward to seeing what's going to happen in these next few years, especially with all of this talk about global climate catastrophe. I'm really just looking forward to seeing how culture and technology and the green revolution intersect. And whatever your view is on climate change, we can't deny that we're at a very exciting point in time of transition right now. I know an economic philosopher named Robin Hanson who talks about farmers and foraging. I think he'd be a good person to talk to about this. He's also a cryonistus. So I think that there are a lot of interdisciplinary fields that could be intersected when we're dealing with this kind of issue. And I find the whole thing really interesting. And it's also a good way to bring environmentalists into the transhumanist movement. We could talk to people that are in the Green Party and kind of recruit them into the Transhumanist Party through talking about this kind of farming. And, you know, a lot of people that voted for Jill Stein, they're kind of jaded with the current Democratic Party. We could bring them on over to transhumanism. So there's a lot of opportunity there too. So entertainment, recruitment, and upgrading what we currently have as a model.
Yes, thank you, candidate Haywire. You spoke for 4 minutes on that question, so that subtracts 2 minutes from your subsequent time. Now we go to candidate Ben Zion. You have 2 minutes to address the question of vertical farming, vertical towers in cities. What is your policy approach toward those technologies?
Yes. Well, I mean, the story of modernity and very much the trajectory of the 20th century, it does revolve around being able to support and feed 7 billion plus people in this world. And we are going to have to face continuing concerns with this. At the same time, I don't think the population is growing as large as quickly as some people suppose in the it's common trope in the popular imagination, the Malthusian dilemma. But I don't think we're actually facing that. I think the dilemma that we are facing is one where we have to provide sustenance and not be engaging in imperialist shenanigans that undermine smaller states or less developed states, as is very much been the case for 150 years in the United States, and particularly since about 1950. The farming issue is a serious one, and it's one that is being addressed by the private sector. I would place it somewhere on a ranking of important issues for techno-optimists. You know, maybe in the top 100 in terms of securing public funds to that end. But I would not say that it is the first thing that I would turn to. There are an awful lot of other ways to be providing more sustainable food sources. Certainly one of those would be vat-grown meats and meat substitutes. This is the number 2 existential risk in the climate crisis constellation of concerns is these concerns from factory farming. So that's something we have to address. And there's a lot of ways to do that besides this very innovative and interesting type of farming.
Thank you, candidate Ben Zion. You spoke for 2 minutes, and now we move on to candidate Holsopple. What are your thoughts about the desirable policy toward vertical farming and vertical towers in cities?
Yeah, well, the urbanization and the density of our cities is growing, and that's if we're going to have food deserts where millions of people don't have access to those basic requirements. We're going to have to grow it locally as much as possible, even within those areas that vertical farming is the only answer. And vertical farming is also much better. It's better with water, uses less water. So I'm all about those going up as opposed to out. Leaving as much of our natural environment as possible. Takes me just a moment about Ben Zion's idea of using public lands, and I think there's a lot of benefit to that. I don't necessarily agree with the numbers of what money it would generate, because I'm not sure who has that money now and who would abandon what they currently have. But I think it's a great idea to use and build our new cities where we can incorporate vertical farming and the innovation of new constructions and materials.
I have a little
Thank
additional
you,
time.
candidate
Can I address that?
Holsopple, and you have added 40 seconds. Yes, you may. You may, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, so a few people have commented on this at 170. Please.
Yes, sorry, there was a bit of lag, but please proceed.
A few people have commented on this that $173 trillion is a large number, but these lands, this is 85% of these national lands. Just think of those 15% that are national parks. Those other 85% of lands, those are valued at over $200 trillion. Leasing them out in a very structured way that I have described at great length would provide well in excess of the amount that we would be required to provide this basic income to every adult in this country. And it's not just an academic exercise. You mentioned, Mr. Holsopple, before that these ripple effects in the negative that we have from people living so close to poverty line, for people, it's 1.5 million people just living on the street in this country that's come up in this debate. This is not something that anyone should be subjected to. And the basic income of a more robust kind that is funded in a responsible way will do that for us. And I would say also basic income, this is not an idea that Andrew Yang came up with. I know there's some Yang Gang guys watching this, but this goes back to the birth of this country with Thomas Paine and 2 or 3 schemes, including one in 1969 about the size of Andrew Yang's. So he has done something to promote the visibility of this, but he is not in fact the author of this movement.
All right, thank you, candidate Ben Zion, and you spent 1 minute and 40 seconds of your time, but you still have time remaining for subsequent questions. Now, next, because you did broach the subject of universal basic income, we're going to focus on some candidate-specific questions on UBI. The first question goes to candidate Haywire from Graydon L., who asks, how do you plan to fund a UBI practically? He notes the US has a massive debt problem already, and won't that exacerbate the problem? Candidate Haywire, you have 2 minutes.
That's a great question. The US does have a massive debt problem, and we definitely need to be focusing on that. That's why we need to have a major cost of the military budget. Now, right now, we're spending $650 billion on overseas wars. To me, that's absolutely absurd. Now, I think that we can gut those by at least 60%. There's no reason for us to have troops in Afghanistan, Iraq, Venezuela. Let's get them out of there. We're exporting and importing into these banks. That's $55 billion. The Department of Education, now, while there are some good things going on, there are also some senseless classes going on that are brainwashing people. That's a budget of $100 billion. If we maybe cut that by 30% and maybe focus on a more independent private education alternative, we can use a lot of that money for UBI. And then, of course, my platform is focused on getting nonviolent drug offenders and sex workers out of prison, which is a major issue for me. That is $3 billion right there. Now, the DEA, we are spending $2 billion. The NSA, horrible people, they are spying on us right now. In fact, they are watching you right now. The NSA is watching you. They are watching me. They are watching all of us. I don't know if that makes sense to people who might be accusing me of this schizophrenia or something, but they're watching us. The CIA, not schizophrenia, real entity. $27 billion. They're watching us. So let's cut that spending and fund universal basic income. Now, if we cut all of that spending and we use that money to give all of our citizens $2,000 a month, there is no reason that needs to create debt for anybody. What we're doing is taking money that is going to war and locking up non-violent people and being spent to spy on us, to help grow a thriving artistic nation in which people can express themselves. We can do that without creating national debt. I mean, my UBI proposal is for the people. It's not something that is just based on regurgitating somebody else's work. Not that I don't respect Zoltan's UBI proposal. I think it's fantastic, but my UBI proposal is original. It's authentic. It's based on things that I have come up with, based on things that I believe in. And I am sick of seeing these overseas wars. I am sick of seeing people that have done nothing non-consensual or harmful being locked up. And I am sick of our citizens being spied on. I've had enough of it. I've had enough of watching my friends in poverty. I've had enough of homelessness, just like Charles has. And I've had enough of watching people suffer. Transhumanism is about ending suffering. With my UBI proposal, we can have $2,000 a month going to every American citizen without creating national debt. I think I might have a little more time. Does anybody have any more questions? Or?
Candidate Haywire, you answered that question in 3 minutes and 40 seconds. So I am going to subtract 1 minute and 40 seconds from your subsequent time, but we'll move on to Candidate Ben Zion. Candidate Ben Zion, this question is for you because your UBI proposal relies on the federal land dividend to fund it. And I think some of the commentators in the thread have mistaken that for a land tax. And I recall there was a comment that essentially with vertical farmings and the cities becoming more vertical, there would be less space on which this agricultural development would occur, so less land to tax. But can you explain the differences between the federal land dividend as you envision it and a Georgia's land tax, which is what I think those commentators were referring to? And you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, sure. Firstly, I'd like to say that candidate Haywire has given an awful lot of thought to this, but I haven't heard a lot of numbers besides estimates in the negative as to how much her plan would cost. We have some pretty clear ideas about how much our plan would cost. In fact, that $173 trillion, even if it's a little bit off the mark, there would still be additional monies to fund other kinds of programs that would be restorative to the middle class in this country. So it is and this program is sufficiently distinct from that of Zoltanistan. But that being said, you can simply do a search and find out that this program, if you search Zoltanistan federal land dividend, you'll see a clear description of how this is funded and how it works. You can also go to our ebook that I mentioned on the Futurist New Deal and see some of these materials, the last chapter of that. There's awful lot of information out there. So we don't have to worry too much about this program being an added tax burden to people in this country. We do have to think seriously about any tax code undertaking. Rewriting the tax code is something that it can be something that can undermine all manner of industries and techno-progress outcomes. But that's why I've opted to do this in a serious way that doesn't contribute to hyperinflation. And most importantly, it actually would fund this program sufficiently, which this other one would not.
Thank you, Candidate Ben Zion. You answered that question in 1 minute and 45 seconds. So you've added 15 seconds to your time. And
what's my total extra time?
So let me calculate your total extra time in just 1 moment. So now you have 1 minute and 55 seconds of extra time accumulated throughout this set of exchanges. And the next UBI question, though, will go to candidate Holsopple. And this was an observation by one of our earlier commentators. Essentially, candidate Holsopple, both candidates Haywire and Ben Zion, have a detailed set of proposals to fund a universal basic income. Do you have a specific approach toward a universal basic income within your platform beyond just the 222 goals? And if so, could you please describe it in 2 minutes?
You know, I think a basic income for those that are most in need is a good idea. To give it to everyone, I don't think is necessary, and we'll have to explain to people why some people get it and some people don't. Then we'll have to educate people that when they get it doesn't mean that they stop working, that there is a path to a more robust involvement in society, and we have to present a path that they can take to enjoy the camaraderie and the growth of the economy based on their contribution to it. I don't have a universal basic income per se in my plan now. I think in talking to people that are better economists than I am, I would be open to such a thing, but I'm not the expert to present that. Other than I think Ben's idea is great of using those public lands and tying that into the vertical farming. When we go in, we don't just use vertical farming. We use all available technologies in rebuilding these cities, and we encourage and reward those corporations that are part of it, and those people that come up with those technologies. But yeah, no specific universal basic income, but along that line, I think that we should have within our cities places that hungry people can go and get fed, where they can bathe and change clothes, and minimum places that people can sleep. And that is my form of a universal basic income, is providing that basic minimum to people. And we're already spending tens of billions of dollars on that. So I don't think that's going to be a problem transferring some of those funds to things that are making sense to experts.
Thank
Can
you.
I respond to that for a moment, Gennady?
Yes, you still have some additional time. Candidate Holsopple, you were right on time in your response.
Yes. So I think reasonable people can disagree on different approaches to this. Negative income tax, a federal job guarantee, or alternatives that are often floated. These are things that volumes have been written on. The United States has some features of a negative income tax. Not least of those is the earned income tax credit. But the difference here is that means testing, aside from it, the idea that it's unfair, I don't think it's unfair to withhold this from the super wealthy. But at the same time, the very means testing creates a greater expense than it would be to be paying that income to those people. So this is an administrative concern. Why we would want to have a basic income rather than other approaches. And there have also been volumes written about that, so I won't get long-winded on it. Thank you for allowing me to address that.
Yes, thank you, candidate Ben Zion, and you spoke for 40 seconds on that, so you have 1 minute and 15 seconds of accumulated time for subsequent questions and statements. Now, we have delved into the subject of UBI in a fairly thorough fashion. The next set of questions is going to be candidate specific from the audience, and I endeavored to pick some challenging questions for each candidate once again. So candidate Haywire, one of our viewers stated that if you were to encounter Donald Trump and Donald Trump tries to write you off, and these are the commentator's words and not mine, as a, quote, crazy little girl with loony ideas and weird friends, this commentator says that Donald Trump will attack you like this. So if he does attack you like this, how will you respond? And you have 2 minutes.
I would laugh hysterically because the entire nation has accused him of having every mental illness in the book. I mean, people have been talking about how Trump is a narcissist, a sociopath. I mean, what mental disorder have people not accused Trump of having? They've accused him of being a schizophrenic. I mean, people have been talking about Trump's bad mental health for a while. So I would say pot, kettle, black. No, I would say pot, kettle, white, and then I would flash him the okay symbol. And then maybe I'd ask him if he wanted to have a beer and we could talk about the working class. I'd say, you'll take the working class of the blue collar. I'll take the working class of the tech collar. We'll divvy them up. You'll represent those guys. I'll represent these guys. And then maybe after I beat you with my pirate spaceship, then you can tell me who's crazy. To the commenter, yes, my friends are weird, but you know what my friends also are? Visionary. You know who else was a visionary? Elon Musk. You know who else was weird? David Bowie. You know what else David Bowie did? He wrote songs about going to outer space. You know what else David Bowie did? He wrote songs about going to outer space that were extremely popular. These were best-selling songs. Now, David Bowie grew to be one of the most popular musicians of our time. Now, guess who was a fan of David Bowie? Elon Musk. So I would say, Mr. Trump, have you ever listened to David Bowie? Do you think that he was one of us? And I would say to Mr. Trump, do you think Steve Bannon is a Bowie fan? I would ask him. I mean, I heard that Steve Bannon was a fan of Alexander Dugin, that he read some Rene Guénon, and he was interested in the fourth turning. So maybe if Trump wasn't a fan, maybe Bannon would have been a fan of Bowie. And then I would say to Trump, maybe we're both crazy. Maybe we live in a society of lunatics, and maybe your friends should meet my friends, and maybe your working class voters and my working class voters can get together and overthrow this corrupt globalist regime with my pirate spaceship. And then I would say, Mr. Trump, I've got something to tell you. My populists are more transgressive than yours. Big man.
All right, Haywire, you spoke for 2 minutes and 20 seconds on this question, so that subtracts 20 seconds from your time. Now, candidate Ben Zion, the next question goes to you, and one of our commentators accused you of admiring Chinese authoritarianism, and this was an opportunity for you to discuss your views on China and trade with China, as well as China's alleged authoritarian regime. You have 2 minutes.
Well, I mean, the worldview of the China hawk, this is largely a rhetorical position, right? There's there's not going to be a war with China. There should not be this trade war that we have with China now. This is not a winning proposal. To say such a thing is not to say that a Chinese social credit score or a Chinese human rights abuses or a limited number of other concerns. I mean, some of these things are just a silly kind of tropes on the part of these far right individuals who want to have something to talk about so that they can. Okay, candidate Haywire is having a hard time right now, but there's no realistic sense in which this is a pro-China platform, and this is just kind of more fake news, made up stuff, just like what's going on right now with candidate Haywire. I'll defer the rest of my time to candidate Haywire.
Okay, so I just want to say, I'm not far right, I'm far riot, because we need to have a
Well, I was not referring to you in that statement. I was referring, in fact, to China hawks in government. But you made it about yourself, as you tend to do.
You said you were referring your time to me. Now you're saying you're not referring your time to me. Are you going to make up your mind, or are you going to make up your ass?
Yeah, okay. I'll make up my ass. That's good.
Well, at least I'm wearing makeup. Maybe you put your makeup on your butthole, then you'd look a little better.
Okay, I'll take that into consideration. It's good campaign advice.
All right.
I'm
so-
sorry, I can't take you seriously. I'm trying, but it's just not
And
happening.
now you're not taking any of this seriously. That's the problem. That's why you're going to lose.
That's why you're losing.
Well, candidates, I think it is time for us to move on to the next question. And the next question is candidate Holsopple. I think this is just about the single most negative allegation that anyone in the comment thread has made about your campaign, and that is it has been accused of being globalist. Now, how would you respond to that? What is your view of globalism? Do you have any particular understanding of that term? Is it good or is it bad? And either way, how does it relate to your campaign and Project 222?
Well, we are one of many nations, and my allegiance is to this country, but I think we need to be leaders among all nations. So if globalism means that we become homogenous with those other nations, and we don't favor our own borders, we don't make America first. If that's the antithesis of globalism, of making American first, and Rachel was saying of trade more within the U.S., we don't have those options. We breathe the same air, we drink the same water, we rely on the same technologies to produce our shelter and our food. There's less and less boundaries, and that's the reason we're going vertical. I think we need to take in the strengths of people, not nations, not parties. I want to reach out to everyone, yes, because we all share that same common denominator. And therefore, we can reach the intelligence of the individual. Take somebody's food, water, and shelter away for a couple of days, and they're going to listen very well if you offer it back to them. So those nations as a whole, they need to learn to manage their own economies. We're not going in and rescuing the economy of each country, but we do want to advocate and offer ways that those economies can grow so that we can trade with the population that is within those countries. So I don't see a disconnect. I think that we all are in the world together, and we need to respond in such a way.
Yes. Thank you.
Gennady, can I take a moment to talk about globalism with my remaining time?
Yes, candidate Holsopple, you were right on time. Thank you for your response. Candidate Ben Zion, you have 2 minutes and 5 seconds of accumulated time. Feel free to use any of that to discuss globalism.
Yes, thank you, sir. This word is often used by people who I would regard as low information consumers of media, and it's used by people on the rightward spectrum, but not exclusively. And there's a lot to unpack there. For one thing, it's often used in the concept of discussing some post-nationalist ideas, which everyone in this panel has spoken in support of in a variety of ways. It's also, but at the same time, it's also used to talk about kleptocratic practices or generally very staunchly pro-business practices. Post-nationalism and an overly pro-business set of regulations, those things are not closely related. So what people are doing when they're using this term globalism is just throwing out a buzzword that sounds cool and makes them sound really informed, and adds nothing to a conversation that people who have a Luciferian view of.
And that question is from Taylor B., who asks, how will you endeavor to make transhumanism and the Transhumanist Party more popular with the youth? Candidate Haywire, you have 2 minutes.
That's a great question. As you guys know, that is one of my main focuses, culture. Transhumanism is all about culture. With the Telegraph, when I did the interview about the corruption going on at Humanities, with the child rapist. I'd rather not keep referring to him, but it was a big issue the Unism is about. They need to be playing video games. Now, whether it's video games about vertical farming, whether these are video games about artificial intelligence, video games about mind uploading, video games about biomechanics, or simply virtual reality games in which they're interacting with simulations, in which they're creating art with augmented reality, in which they're learning how to enhance their bodies through these virtual simulations. We need public education on transhumanism. Even if we're just going to preschools and we're having people teach kids how to paint an augmented reality, we're teaching kids how to paint in the sky. That's what we need to be doing to reach the youth and educate them about transhumanism. Now, you think about a sandbox and you think about a playground and you think about some kids playing in a sandbox on a playground when they're 4 years old. Now, imagine if that sandbox and that playground has augmented reality. Now you've got the kids in the sandbox and they're playing in augmented reality and they're painting in the sandbox and they're sharing their visions with each other in that sandbox through AR. Imagine the possibilities of public education on transhumanism.
Yes, thank you, candidate Haywire. And now we will proceed to candidate Ben Zion. Candidate Ben Zion, you have 2 minutes to address the question of how transhumanism can become more influential with the youth.
Okay, sorry, I was hearing the Sesame Street song in my head after this this playground discussion. Yeah, so I mean, we can do a lot of things to do that, and we are doing a lot of things to do that. You know, hollowing out as your key demo, incels and people under 30 on who are interested in words like alt-right and art-right. That's not who this party is. And so we can be doing better than that. And that's done through all manner of outreach, but it's not done through attacking the Humanity Plus organization, whatever mistakes they may have made. That's all of our viewers. That's all of our voters right there. So, I mean, are you going to go out and get 1,000 more of your incels to get signed up in the next few days? I really doubt it. So we have to take a serious-minded approach to this, but also keep it fun and interesting. And it has been fun and interesting, and we can be doing an awful lot more. As I said, this organization, the Arizona Transhumanist Party, is reaching out to people across the spectrum. The Transhumanist Party is reaching out to people across the spectrum. I've been doing an awful lot of interviews and press with people from all walks of life to try and enliven and broaden this landscape. And I am pleased with the progress that we are making in reaching young people. You know, an awful lot of people in my network are millennials. They're Greens, Independents, Justice Democrats, and people of various walks of life. Those people, this country is skewing further and further left. So we have to kind of maybe not take a strategy where we actually have 20 people that we're reaching out to. I'm finished.
Yes, thank you, candidate Ben Zion. And you have added 10 seconds to your time. And now, candidate Holsopple, for your 2 minutes, could you please address what you would like to have done to make transhumanism more popular with the youth and to increase the youth reach of the Transhumanist Party?
Yes, I think the youth are the most ripe for transhumanism. They're not vested in a economy. They're not vested in the use of our resources in a particular way. And they are the most aware of the impacts of a failed economy, a failed environment, the refugee situation. They've got the longest to live. So I think they're the easiest ones to reach if we put together. I love Rachel's idea and of the video games and virtual reality, you know, and I think if they're crafted to introduce technologies like vertical farming and urban density and what it takes to get along socially And what it, besides learning a vocation or some education that allows you to enter into the present economy, how to transform the present economy to one that has longevity, that is able to adapt to those challenges and the changes of our economic system and our infrastructure. And education is the center of that. And we need to get away from the bricks and mortar of traditional education and bring out that the most creative in creative ways that children will listen to, and they can become members of the Transhumanist Party. If I'm not mistaken, there is no age limit in people voting in the Transhumanist Party. And that's something that in 2024, maybe we'll have a electrified base within the 14-year-olds, within the 8th graders. And just quickly, one way that I found a great way to communicate with people is in front of the White House or walking around the mall. And I made some videos of that you can see on the YouTube channel through the website. And it's really, and I concentrated on the young, not the very young, but the 18 to 25-year-old. And they get it. They see that there's a need for things. And I wasn't a transhumanist the last time I was there, but you can bet that the next time I am in DC or San Francisco or any of the places that I travel, that transhumanism will be introduced, particularly as an educator that I'm speaking to, and because they get it, they want their kids to have the best. That's why they're in education. So I think if we work through the school system and we put it out there, that it either makes sense or it doesn't. And I think that the youth have the most to lose, so they're going to take the flag.
All right.
Gennady, if I could have 30 seconds of my additional time, please.
Yeah, that is fine. I just wanted to mention candidate Holsopple spoke for 3 minutes in response to this question, so that takes a minute off his time. He is going to have 20 seconds for final remarks. Candidate Ben Zion, you have 55 seconds of accumulated time, so please proceed.
Yes. Well, unlike Mr. Holsopple, I have been a life extensionist and techno-optimist for about as long as I can remember. If you're interested in these ideas that have been brought up in these previous 2 comments, I would suggest that you check out an interview that I did with my hero, Isaac Arthur, a great technology, science and futurism blogger from the similar, from the very same podcast. And we talked about various metaverse concepts. And there's an awful lot of policy implementations in the near future that could be derived from those that we're not capitalizing upon. So I would applaud both of you for bringing that up. And thank you. And that concludes my time.
All right. Thank you, candidate Ben Zion. You spoke for 40 seconds. So you have 15 seconds left over added to the 2 minutes of standard allotment for the closing remarks. The reason why I say that is because candidate Haywire right now has a deficit of 4 minutes, which means, unfortunately, she has consumed the entirety of her closing remarks already. All right. Candidate Ben Zion, that means that your closing remarks are going to be up next. You have 2 minutes and 15 seconds, followed by 20 seconds of candidate Holsopple's remarks. But candidate Ben Zion, the floor is yours.
Yes. From time immemorial, people have spoken of some life extension concepts or other. And even those of us who've taken an interest in extropianism from the beginning and who have been involved in this remain skeptical on some of these things, and probably will remain skeptical on some of these things. But the simple fact is, last week, George Church, arguably the most accomplished geneticist alive, released a set of articles talking about specific genetic interventions for life extension and also human improvement, upgrading. And this is a fascinating article. It's a wonderful time to be alive, but it is not it is not a foregone conclusion that any of us will benefit from these things to the extent that we want, which is why, as was mentioned just moments ago, outreach is key, and positioning this organization in a responsible way and in a publicity-minded way is the best thing that we can be doing. The Futurist New Deal is the best choice in that regard. We have a platform that has been conceived from the beginning for solving these great human problems. A UBI and e-governance in the broadest sense. These are not just things that we made up. These are things that are meant to get you to a life extension civil society that is sustainable and hopefully avoid the kinds of things where we need to all get on the mothership. That's hopefully avoid the kinds of things where we need to be suing people about having cryonics. These things are a measure of last resort, and so we have to do everything that we can to improve our society from a techno-optimist point of view. And this party is head and shoulders above other parties in describing these new ideas. And so you guys are key. The Futurist New Deal is the choice for you. I hope that you will read our literature and look at what we're doing and continue to be watching all of these interviews and doing real press, not making jokes, doing real press, not swearing and crying and freaking out, doing real interviews with thought leaders, and doing the best that we can to keep this a serious-minded operation. This is a policy club. It's not a place for people to just be getting their jollies. It is a policy club, and that's what we're trying to do here. And Gennady, you're an excellent leader in that regard. I thank you again, sir, for all that you've done in keeping this this organization on track.
Yes, thank you, candidate Ben Zion. I appreciate your good words, and you did speak 30 minutes over your allotted time for your closing remarks. Now, with candidate Haywire, her deficit was sufficiently significant that 30 seconds would not restore her time, but I will add 30 seconds to candidate Holsopple. So now, candidate Holsopple, you have 50 seconds to provide your closing remarks. Please proceed.
Well, as I started, we have the opportunity to present a big idea. We're a new party, and the majority of people have never heard of us, much less contemplated joining our party. And the transhumanist message to me was fascinating. I related to it. I'd never heard of it before, and I think that there are millions of people out there that can do the same thing. And I believe the big idea of 222 is the tool that we need to get the message out for transhumanism. And I appreciate everyone's time. It's been 3 hours, and thank you very much, Gennady.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. You're brilliant.
Yes, thank you, candidate Holsopple. Thank you also to candidate Ben Zion and candidate Haywire for your remarks today. I will make some administrative closing statements in that everyone watching this debate, please make sure that you are registered as members of the U.S. Transhumanist Party. Please go to transhumanist-party.org and register by August 10th, 2019, if you have not done so already, because that is what will render you eligible to vote in the electronic primary between August 11th and August 17th. We definitely encourage more people to sign up for membership prior to the expiration of the registration period. So if you are intrigued by any of the candidates and any of their ideas, no matter whom you support, no matter whom you would like to see win, this is your opportunity to have a voice. This is your opportunity to have an impact. And that is what we want to achieve: maximum participation in our electronic primary. Now, you have heard a lot of comments from the candidates, both on policy and on some controversial matters that have been raised. And I don't think there's any way to diminish or de-emphasize the fact that this has been a controversial debate and this is a controversial primary election. I hope that what this venue has provided for everyone is some transparency about where the candidates stand, what their views are, what some of their histories are, and all of this is information that you need to take into consideration when making your decision. I'm not going to be making that decision for you. Every member of the Transhumanist Party is going to have one vote. And as one final remark regarding how the vote will be structured, it will be an electronic vote during a 7-day period. So at any time during that period, you would be able to vote. It would be a ranked preference vote, which means you don't just get to vote for one option. You can rank order all of the options, including a none of the above option, which is standard on all of our ballots. So please display your entire preference set among these candidates. There's no incentive for strategic voting. There's no incentive for you to vote for a so-called lesser evil. Just vote according to your genuine preferences of which candidate you would like to see win the Transhumanist Party nomination. And with that, once again, I would like to thank all of the candidates for participating. I would like to thank all of the audience members for your questions and your involvement in the chat. I would like to thank Pavel Ilin, the secretary of the U.S. Transhumanist Party, for his diligent technical work behind the scenes to make sure that this debate is a success, despite the fact that we lost the ability to use Google Hangouts on air just on August 1st. Nonetheless, this live stream was able to come to fruition. And finally, I would like to thank Steel Archer from Detonation, because Steel Archer has been also broadcasting a live stream of this debate. And if you go on to his channel, Detonation, he is going to have some post-debate analysis, which will be quite interesting to watch. So thank you very much, everyone, for your participation.
And I'll be going to the Unshackled post-mortem of this debate right now. I imagine other people might be able to call in, but so do check that out. The Unshackled, largest alternative media network in Australia, doing great work on Detonation. And you can continue this conversation with me and Steel Archer in just moments.
All right. Thank you very much. And that concludes our second and final official virtual debate of the U.S. Transhumanist Party 2019.
Right. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Remember to go beyond the center with me.
Thank you, everybody. Welcome to the party is my slogan. Okay.